Hey everybody, Andy here with Mossy Creek Fly Fishing. Today is Monday, June 17th, and I'll be bringing you the fishing forecast this week. The week ahead is full of lots of hot and dry days, so we've definitely got a bit of a weather change going on now. We're getting into the summertime, low water, clear water, warm days, and so we're going to see some fishing transition here as we move forward through this week and into the oncoming weeks. Before we get into too much doom and gloom with low water, I will say that on the National Weather Service's 3-month outlook, they are predicting for our area to see above average precipitation. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that that's the case. But at the moment, we do have low clear water. And so let's talk about our trout streams and what to expect out there. On our mountain streams, we do still have water temperatures that are perfectly fine for fishing. Not a bad idea to keep a stream thermometer with you. Stream thermometer is a valuable tool, whether it's to watch and see, is it safe for me to be trout fishing, but also to take water temps and figure out what kind of activity level you might see from the trout. So stream thermometer, if you bring it with you right now, we're looking for water temps below 68 degrees. That tells us that the trout are happy and are going to be feeding well and aren't too stressed from water temperatures or anything. And then it's something you can have with you the rest of the year, and in the winter time use it to figure out how active the trout may be on a given day-to-day basis. But for this time of year, just watching water temps to be 68 or less and you'll be good to go. So our mountain stream fishing has been good. We are low and clear, but really lots of what I said last week is going to remain true this week. If you're fishing those long, slow pools, fish are going to be fairly spooky, so you may not do quite as well in that, but focus on your moving water, areas where a nice riffle's dumping into the pool, breaking that surface, and delivering tons of oxygen and food to the fish. So focus on those areas. We're fishing a lot of the same flies that I talked about last week. You'll still see the occasional mayfly, the occasional stonefly here and there, but most of our major hatches in our mountain streams are coming to an end. And so we're starting to transition over, fish a lot of our attractor-oriented terrestrials. So the high-vis flying ant is a great pattern. It's got a flashy underbody, and it's got a nice high-vis green post on top of it, so you can see it very easily, and it's something that brook trout love to eat. I've caught some of my biggest brook trout this time of year on a PMX. A lot of people think they're too big, but you'll be amazed how small of a brook trout will still go after those. And outside of some of that stuff, your usual attractor patterns will still catch you fish. So royal wolves, elk hair caddis, parachute Adams, stimulators. Yellow is a good color because there are still some of those little yellow stoneflies around. But really again, just like I usually say, drift the fly well, focus on not having too much drag, and look at those areas of the pool that have a little bit more oxygen and a little bit more cover. That's where you're going to find your actively feeding fish. I will say too, you may want to focus on drainages that have higher water flows on average. So, down here on our west slope of the Shenandoah National Park, a lot of our streams are very small and they get low on a normal year regardless of how much rain we're having. In the summertime when the trees are all blooming and you're having lots of water sucked out of the ground, those streams are going to get low regardless. So focus on stuff that's got more water in it on an average day. Some of your bigger drainages over on the east slope will probably be fishing a little bit better than those little tiny creeks that we like to fish throughout April and May when we have good flows. Now down on the spring creeks are fishing great. We've got good water temps. Early morning we're having lots of tricos come off. I was on Mossy a couple mornings in a row and saw tricos every day. Fish were eating them, fish were happy. And so fishing those tiny little dry flies can be effective, but oftentimes I'll start with something I can see a bit better. Something like a ant pattern can oftentimes work well during a trico hatch. Alternatively, if you can't get them to eat something like an ant, don't be afraid to do a 2-dry setup. So just like you would set up a dry dropper, tie a nice high-vis dry fly in the front, and then put your trico pattern that you can barely see, if at all, maybe 12 inches behind it. That high-vis pattern will give you that visual, and then you're watching for rises in that surrounding area. I will say, I will caution you a bit, if you're in an area with lots of competing currents, that can cause some drag on your back fly, but it's better than not being able to see it at all. So give that a shot if you have trouble seeing some of those tiny little trico patterns. And then as we move throughout the day, the water on Mossy, for example, is very low and clear. So the fish, as that sun gets high, are definitely pushing into the banks, getting under any sort of cover or vegetation that they can. So as you work up the creek, yes, you may find some fish in your deep channels right down the middle of the creek, but I fished it the last 2 evenings, and the majority of fish that were active and feeding were tucked tight into the banks. And so that means looking for spots that are not easy to cast to, and they don't have to be a tremendous amount of water. So I caught lots of fish in spots that were maybe only 6 or 8 inches deep, but they had a nice undercut. And if you could position that fly where it would just swing right up under there, oftentimes you had a fish that was taking full advantage of that piece of food coming to them. So small streamers had worked well for me. I like that I can position those very well through some of those tighter spots. You can maneuver your rod and change the direction of your fly very easily to lead it into those areas and pull it back out if you're heading into a snag. So keep that in mind. But we're also going to have a lot more terrestrials coming out too, and those are a little bit easier to smack down on the bank and let them drift. And sometimes a nice hard smack of the fly will bring that fish out of the bank and have them come up and grab it before they tuck back up under that hidey hole of theirs. Now, as far as terrestrials go, we're still not into the peak season of it, but fish are eating them. I threw a hopper around a little bit yesterday just for the fun of it, and did have a couple of fish come up and look. Beetles as well, ant patterns, so you can certainly get some dry fly fishing, although it is a little bit sporadic. So nymph fishing and small streamers on the spring creeks have been producing more numbers of fish, I would say, but you can't beat a dry fly eat, so don't feel that you're limiting yourself if you go out and throw a dry fly around. And we're going to see more and more of that as these weeks progress and we get more and more into our terrestrial season. And that's true for Beaver Creek as well. We're going to see the same kind of stuff out there. If you go over and fish like Spring Run, that's another spring creek in our area, those fish definitely get a little bit pickier on very specific types of bugs. So on a creek like that, scuds and freshwater shrimp are usually your best producers. And then as we look at other options, for trout, we're really going to want to focus on places that have 1, a constant cold water supply, and 2, a constant water supply. So that means our freestone streams are going to be the ones that struggle the most in our low water. But if you hit your tailwaters or your spring creeks, you're going to find fish that are very happy and very active. So you can definitely still get out and do that. Now the other option is smallmouth fishing. We're really into the peak of things now. The river is low and clear, and that means great dry fly fishing, or topwater fishing as we tend to call it when we talk about smallmouth. And you can get out and wade fish too right now. When the water gets real low and clear, it's much easier to get around. The best way to fish the Shenandoah is definitely still from a boat. So if anybody wants to get out and float with us, give us a call. We've got some trips available as early as July. And again, with the river low and clear, it's some of the most exciting topwater fishing of the year. We're oftentimes fishing moving baits, so things that we cast and retrieve like topwater frogs, deer hair frogs, wiggle minnows, pole dancers, all these different flies that just move like crazy on the surface, and you get these very violent strikes, smallmouth coming out of the depths to grab a hold of that. The other nice thing about hot weather and sunny days when we're smallmouth fishing is that the fish don't want to sit in the middle of the river as much. They want to find some cover, and oftentimes that cover for them is the shade of the trees up on the bank. And so instead of having to worry about this 100-yard wide river, you've got 10 feet on the bank where lots of the fish push into. Some of your deeper holes, you're going to have fish, duck down and find some thermal refuge a little bit deeper as well. And so in those kinds of places, we're oftentimes changing tactics and going to something like a crayfish that gets down deep and gets in front of those fish. But throughout the river, if you have those areas where it's kind of a slick, there's lots of bedrock and there's little creases in between the rock, places like that are where we're going to have great topwater fishing. So Keep that in mind as you float the river. Oftentimes I recommend, if you have the ability this time of year, bring 2 rods with you. Set one up with a deep diver and set one up with your Topwater, and just grab a different rod depending on the conditions that you're sitting in. The other thing we have great fishing for this time of year is our carp. When the water is low and clear, you get a lot of sight fishing opportunities for them. Probably the hardest fighting fish you're going to find around here. And that's another advantage to having like a crayfish set up on one of your 2 rods. If you get an opportunity for a feeding carp, oftentimes they'll eat a crayfish if it's placed well and fished well. And so you can grab that whenever you need it there. This will probably be the last forecast where I mention musky much. As we get into our warmer weather, our temps are going to spike and get to a point where it's unsafe to catch and land those fish if you plan on releasing them. So if you plan to get out for them, you can maybe get a few more days of early morning fishing, but really we're getting to the point where our stream temps, our river temps are getting up, and we're going to be waiting on that till the fall. But again, early morning, check your water temps, but you could probably get some first light action in if you're like me and craving 1 or 2 more days. So that's it for our forecast this week. Get out and fish. We've still got pretty good water levels, and we've still got plenty of places with cold water for trout, and our smallmouth fishing is phenomenal and will just continue to get better and better. So we hope to see you all on the water. Come on by the shop if you got questions or need some flies. We'd be happy to chat, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks.